Hey everybody, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to give you my thoughts on the WWE B-PPV events from No Way Out 2007 through Armageddon 2007. Let's start off with No Way Out 2007, which was at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California. I did not go to the show in person because at the time I wasn't really feeling the card. I didn't feel like it was that big of a deal. And I really felt it was lacking for a pay-per-view that's the final event before WrestleMania. I just felt it wasn't that strong of a show to go to in person. And as it turns out, I feel I was probably right in not going. There's nothing I feel bad about missing in person. I did think the main event was really strong. The WrestleMania main events, the main event was the only selling point of this pay-per-view in my opinion. You had John Cena and Shawn Michaels teaming up against Batista and The Undertaker. I liked the match. I thought it was really good. The crowd was hot for it. And I liked the finish with Batista turning on Undertaker, getting his payback from Undertaker's attack. And that set up the WrestleMania main events. I thought that was well done. I did enjoy the opening match, the Hardy Boys and Chris Benoit versus Eminem and MVP. I thought that was a really solid opener. Everything else on this show I thought was subpar for a WWE pay-per-view event. I mean, you had a lot of crap on this show. You had Finlay and the Little Bastard against the Boogeyman and Little Boogeyman. That was lame. You had ECW champion Lashley against Mr. Kennedy. I found it funny watching back on this pay-per-view again to see how little the crowd reacted to Bobby Lashley. Despite the fact that they were investing so much in Lashley, WWE was giving him this monster push heading into WrestleMania, and the crowd just did not care about him all that much. And it had a really lame-ass finish with the DQ. I hate when WWE does the DQs on pay-per-views, especially back in the day when they were $45, $50. I felt it was just so cheap and such a cop-out, and you know there were plenty of DQ finishes on pay-per-view in 2007, so you'll hear more of my complaining on that. So moving on here past No Way Out, next up is WWE Backlash 2007, the first pay-per-view after WrestleMania 23. I thought that the main event was excellent. John Cena defending the WWE title against Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton, and Edge. In my opinion, one of the best fatal four-way matches WWE has ever produced. Definitely worth checking out. You had Undertaker versus Batista, last man standing match. I thought the match was very good up until the finish, which was a no contest. Batista speared Undertaker off the stage, and neither one of them were able to answer the 10 count. Yes, the spot looked cool, but like countouts and DQs, I'm not a big fan of last man standing matches ending with nobody standing, nobody making the 10 count. To me, it's just another cheap cop-out finish to keep the feud going, and when you're paying $45, $50, it's frustrating. So I wasn't really a big fan of that, but I did enjoy the match. You had Vince McMahon becoming ECW champion, him teaming up with Shane and Umaga against Bobby Lashley, and Vince got the pinfall and won the title. So that was noteworthy. And that was about it from this pay-per-view. It was really the main event and Batista and Undertaker that carried the show. Judgment Day 2007. A very forgettable pay-per-view in WWE history, in my opinion, for the most part. It seems that over the years, Judgment Day was always one of the weaker WWE shows, and this one was no exception. Not much happened on this pay-per-view. It was basically just time filler leading into the next WWE pay-per-view. The main event was John Cena versus the Great Khali. Need I say more? I think my favorite part of this pay-per-view was Randy Orton beating Shawn Michaels. They did the storyline where Shawn Michaels was in no condition to compete, but he came out anyways, and Randy Orton proceeded to just beat the crap out of Shawn Michaels, and he gave him the punt, and this was the beginning of the transformation of Randy Orton's character, where he went from being the legend killer to the Viper. He became more sadistic, more vicious, and this was the darker side of Randy Orton starting to emerge. I like watching this match to see the beginning of the new Randy Orton character, and he was really coming into his own at this point as a single star. I mean, he did have that run when he split from Evolution, but this was really when Randy Orton started to perform like a true main eventer. So this was worth checking out. And you had Chris Benoit in his last pay-per-view appearance, losing the U.S. title to MVP winning 2 straight falls. In my opinion, this was a good match, but it fell short of being a classic. So it's worth checking out because it was Benoit's last pay-per-view appearance, but that's about it. And, that's really the only noteworthy events from this pay-per-view. You also had Bobby Lashley beating Vince, Umaga, and Shane McMahon in a rematch from Backlash, but Vince said since he wasn't pinned, he's still the ECW champion. So that just led to the next pay-per-view, which was One Night Stand. This was the first WWE-branded One Night Stand. It was no longer a standalone ECW pay-per-view, and this was the third One Night Stand, by the way. I thought that this was a good show. This had all the stipulations, so it was a fun show from start to finish because you had a variety of stipulation matches. It kicked off with RVD versus Randy Orton in a stretcher match. And I remember back during this time, RVD was leaving. Everyone thought RVD was going to lose to Randy Orton since he was leaving the company, and that's traditionally how things went. The guy on his way out puts over the guy staying in the company, but WWE decided to swerve everybody by having Randy Orton win the match, and then afterwards Randy Orton beat the crap out of him. So the end result was Orton beating up RVD, but RVD getting the win just to throw off everyone. So back in the day, if they had the betting odds or whatever, a lot of people would have been screwed. A lot of fun matches on the show. You had the tables match with ECW stars. You had the street fight, Lashley finally beating Vince to win the ECW title, only to be stripped of it by Vince the next night. A ladder match, the Hardys against Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, the world's greatest tag team. This was a fun match, a spectacle like most ladder matches are. Shelton Benjamin almost killed himself a couple of times during this match. It was crazy, some of the bumps he took. That match is definitely worth checking out. Steel cage match, Edge versus Batista. Edge actually won the match here. Edge was able to get over the top before Batista could crawl out. So, this was a good match. And the main event, John Cena versus the Great Khali, Falls Count Anywhere. This is about as good you will get with Great Khali in there. Better than it really had any right to be, in my opinion. I mean, this was a solid main event with Khali being in there. So, it was good for what it was. Next up, we have Vengeance, the Night of Champions. Oh, and also the previous pay-per-view One Night Stand was also called One Night Stand Extreme Rules. So WWE was starting to develop these themed pay-per-views. One Night Stand, of course, had all the stipulation matches. That was really the first themed pay-per-view in WWE where all the matches had a certain theme to it, or the entire pay-per-view had a theme to it. And here we have Vengeance, Night of Champions, where every title was on the line for the first time. That's what they were branding it as. So this show is noteworthy because of the fact that that weekend was when the Chris Benoit murder-suicide went down. And, everyone was wondering what was going on with Benoit because there were reports that he was no-showing the pay-per-view, and everyone was speculating on that. You had the final of the vacant ECW title tournament, which was supposed to be Chris Benoit versus CM Punk, but Benoit no-showed, so it was Johnny Nitro versus CM Punk. The fans were chanting Chris Benoit, not knowing what had gone down that weekend. Johnny Nitro won the title and then would go on to become John Morrison. That was really the most noteworthy thing on this entire pay-per-view. Last chance match for the world title, Batista versus Edge, and of course Batista got screwed again. Main event was a good match. It was a championship challenge. Cena versus Mick Foley versus King Booker versus Randy Orton versus Lashley. I enjoyed the match, but it was quite short. I actually felt it could have been longer, and it would have been better if it had gone on for a longer period of time. Just as it was starting to get really good, it was over. They did have the tease of John Cena and Lashley very briefly, and that, of course, would lead up to the next pay-per-view. This was fine. This was a fine match, but I felt it could have been better. Next up, we have the Great American Bash. The main event, John Cena versus Lashley, babyface versus babyface. I thought that this was really good. This was, as it turned out, Bobby Lashley's final WWE pay-per-view appearance. He would end up getting injured, and then he was never brought back, and he never appeared. I think he made one more appearance after this pay-per-view on a Raw, and then he disappeared. And that was the end of his run in WWE. You had the Cruiserweight title match with Hornswoggle winning the Cruiserweight title, and that was the end of the Cruiserweight Championship. So what a way to go out with Hornswoggle winning the title. And he was no longer the little bastard. It seems that character, in my opinion, that character was entertaining until he became Hornswoggle, and then it just became a magnet of bad segments on WWE television. You know, you had this with him winning the Cruiserweight title and being Vince's son, and then doing the stuff with DX, and then Carlito, and all this wacky stuff once he became Hornswoggle. So yeah, not really a whole lot else to note on this pay-per-view. Yeah, that's about it for this pay-per-view. Very forgettable. Next up, we have Unforgiven, which I thought was a very poor pay-per-view. Probably the worst WWE pay-per-view of 2007. The main event, the final match to end the show, was Undertaker versus Mark Henry. Yes, this was the main event of this pay-per-view. And it was every Undertaker match you've ever seen. Literally nothing to it. Just Undertaker beating yet another big man. That's all it was. Randy Orton versus John Cena ended in a DQ. Very lame finish. I hate it when it's a pay-per-view and you're spending $45, $50. I know I sound like a broken record, but WWE kept doing this, and to their credit, people kept buying the pay-per-views. So who's the sucker? But in my opinion, it's just not a good idea to do this on a regular basis. And getting off track here, but WWE has gotten better about it in recent years, and it's not as big of a deal now since the pay-per-views are part of the network package. But back then, it was frustrating. And not a whole lot else on this pay-per-view. CM Punk against Elijah Burke was a good match for the ECW title. And Batista won the world title by beating the Great Khali and Rey Mysterio in a triple threat. And that was about it. Oh, you had Triple H versus Carlito. And I found this funny because it was no DQ for Carlito only. So that's supposed to make us think that Carlito might have a chance of beating Triple H. But of course, no. Triple H wins, as he always does. So yeah, very predictable. Moving on here to No Mercy. This was a really strong show, and WWE was in a bad situation because John Cena got hurt. He had to vacate the title, and WWE came up with this storyline here where Randy Orton was crowned the new champion by Vince McMahon to kick off the pay-per-view. Triple H came out, demanded a match. He got it. He insulted Vince, and Vince was convinced to make the match for the title, which kicked off the pay-per-view. So you had a WWE title match kicking off the pay-per-view. Triple H won the title from Randy Orton, and then he had to go on later in the show, which was originally scheduled to be Triple H versus Umaga, but now that he was champion, Vince said, since you're the champion, the title is going to be on the line. So in the middle of the show, Triple H beat Umaga, and then Vince breaks the news to him that he has to defend the title again because Randy Orton has cashed in his rematch clause, and the match would be a last man standing match, which was originally advertised for the pay-per-view because it was going to be John Cena versus Randy Orton in a last man standing match. So you had the last man standing match, which was excellent, way better. I wouldn't say way better technically. I mean, it was better in my opinion than Batista and Undertaker from earlier in the year, but also this had a great finish too. Randy Orton hitting the RKO on the table. Table did not break, and Triple H tries to make it back and just barely does not get on his feet for the 10 count. and Randy Orton regains the WWE title. So I thought that this pay-per-view, this whole show-long storyline, I thought was really well done. You had the Punjabi prison match with Batista and the Great Khali. I thought that this was better than the first Punjabi prison match, but I really had no desire after this to see another Punjabi prison match, and we haven't seen another one since. I did like the finish. You had Great Khali climbing over the second structure on the outside, and then Batista, in order to catch up to Khali, jumped from the first structure to the second one and was able to beat Khali over the top and win. I thought that that was a great finish, and they pulled that off very well. And you had Beth Phoenix beating Candice Michelle to win the WWE Divas title, or Women's Championship as it was back then. And that was about it for this pay-per-view in terms of noteworthy moments. Next up, we have Cyber Sunday, where the fans get to vote for the matches and the stipulations and whatnot. Main event, Batista versus Undertaker with the special referee, which of course was voted to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. This was a strong match. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was well done. Triple H versus Umaga in a street fight. That was good. Shawn Michaels versus Randy Orton for the WWE title. Guess how it ended? If you guessed DQ, you got it right. Another DQ finish just to continue the feud and keep it going. So you know how I feel about that. Finally, we have Armageddon, which was the final WWE pay-per-view in standard definition. I thought that this was a solid show. There were no real classics, but there was nothing too bad on this show. All the matches were pretty solid in my opinion. So if you like a show for being consistent from start to finish, this is one I would recommend checking out. In the main event, Edge beat Batista and Undertaker in a triple threat to win the world title. I liked the finish here. I thought it was a good match. I liked the fact that Edge had to have two guys dressed up like him to gain the advantage to win the title. I thought that that was well done. And of course, the two Edge heads were Zack Ryder and Curt Hawkins making their pay-per-view debuts. You had Chris Jericho versus Randy Orton. Guess how this one ended? If you guessed DQ, you got it right again. Another match that was good, but in my opinion, terrible finish. You had Orton throw Jericho out onto the announce table, and Jericho got sent into JBL. JBL got pissed off because Jericho shoved him when he was getting back up. So JBL got in the ring and cost Jericho the match. It was really dumb. Let's just say that. Good match up until the finish. Terrible finish. Jeff Hardy beating Triple H. I remember back at the time, nobody thought that Jeff Hardy would beat Triple H. Everyone thought, oh, Triple H is going to win again, but Jeff Hardy pulled off the surprise win here. This was a good match. I liked it. I thought it was well done. Shawn Michaels versus Mr. Kennedy. That was a good match. Solid show. I mean, this was definitely a very solid pay-per-view. Nothing too terrible, nothing too great, but just very consistent from start to finish. Entertaining show. So that'll do it for my thoughts on the WWE B pay-per-views from No Way Out through Armageddon 2007. Leave a comment. Let me know your favorite pay-per-view moments, your least favorite moments from this period. And stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in the world of wrestling.